In this video, we'll talk about the second work shift and what to consider when choosing schedules around these work times. It's pretty tricky to design a work schedule around this second work shift, so I hope that you watch this video so you don't miss out on the important points that I'm going to say. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Crimson Flower and I'm one of the main authors of Polyphasic.net, the community recommended resource for polyphasic sleepers. So today's video is a continuation in our mini-series on the different work schedules, and we previously made a video on the first work shift schedule. If that applies to you better, I suggest you watch that video so you don't miss out on any important information. The link to it will be in the description. So let's start off by talking about what the second work shift is. The second shift usually runs from around 16 to 24 or 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. This gap, especially if you are consistently able to nap with your working schedule, should allow for several schedules to be adapted to. The main issue lies with the dual core and tri-core schedules, since it's important to have one of those cover at least partially the SWS peak, which runs from 21 to 24, so there's sort of an issue there. With the second work shift, you might have to sleep at work. However, it's not unreasonable to assume that this isn't the case for many of the schedules that I'm going to list. If you are interested in finding a nap spot at work, I talked about that a bit in the video with the first work shift, so you can find that in the description and it would hopefully help you find a spot for where you can sleep consistently at work. The link to it will once again be in the description. In that video, I also talked about how to notify your coworkers about your change in sleep schedule, so I definitely suggest you check that video out. Okay, let's talk about the specific schedules that you need to consider when you want to adapt to a polyphasic schedule around the second work shift. As I already mentioned, dual core and tri-core schedules are pretty hard to pull off because they need to cover at least partially the SWS peak. It's the same thing with schedules with less than 5 hours of total sleep time, because like Everyman 3 also needs to at least partially cover the SWS peak, which happens between 21 and 24 on a natural circadian rhythm. To combat this, you can shift your circadian rhythm and maintain it, and we'll make a video on how to do this in the future. So if you haven't done it already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss when we release the video, because it's definitely going to help you adapt to shorter total sleep time schedules when you're sleeping polyphasically and you're working the second work shift, okay? Depending on the placement of the breaks of your work schedule, having naps that are late will increase the chance that you wake up in SWS, so there might be an issue with napping during the work shift unless you have a really early break there where you can nap. Okay, this should be of course taken into account when you're deciding your work schedule or your polyphasic sleep schedule around your work schedule. Don't place naps too late in the day, and also make sure that the gaps between naps and sleeps in general isn't too large. But okay, on Everyman 1 and Siesta there shouldn't be any issues. The nap on Everyman 1 can be scheduled to start a bit before the second work shift, and on Siesta the same thing can be done with the main core starting after you work and the daily core starts just before you go to work, so that there's still a nice gap and they aren't too close together, but also not too far away. The core would also start at midnight, of course, on Everyman 1 in this example, or pretty early after you get home from there. Though, compared to what I said in the first work shift video, these schedules you don't have to worry about physically strenuous work. You know, if you're exercising at work or forcing your heart rate to be up and you're moving around quite a bit, it doesn't really matter on these schedules because you don't nap during the day on the second work shift with Everyman 1 or Siesta. So you don't have to have the same worry about being able to fall asleep during your work as you have on the first work shift if you have a nap placed during the day. So these would be the schedules that I suggest you try out if you work the second work shift, for starting from 16 and ending at 24. I mean, it's not a lot of options. Everyman 2 might also work, but But the real kicker here is when you have a second work shift that spans from around 15 to 23, because that opens up a lot of more possibilities. Or as I said previously, if you just shift your circadian rhythm a bit later, it should also have the same effect. This is going to allow you to at least partially cover the SWS peak from 23 and onwards. It's at least an hour of the optimal SWS peak covered that way on schedule. The dual core and tri-core schedules are realistic options that you can go for, as long as you don't have a big gap between the last nap and first core. So you might have to sleep during work in this situation in order to not have your homeostatic pressure become too big for you to handle. Everyman 3 is also a possibility, but on schedules with around 4 to 5 hours of total sleep, you should have no larger gap than 7 hours, and from 5 to 6 hours, the gap shouldn't be longer than 8 hours at any point. So just try to think about that when you're picking out a polyphasic schedule that works around your work schedule, okay? Don't have the gaps be too large, but also don't have the naps late in the day, as I said. So it's a bit tricky. It depends on when your breaks are, what schedules you're going to be able to do. Okay, I hope you got some ideas for what schedules you can attempt on a second work shift schedule. Please tell me in the comments below if you have any experience sleeping polyphasically on a second shift work schedule and how it went. Also, please ask if you have any questions regarding what I talked about in this video. In the future, we're going to be talking about third work shift and how to schedule polyphasic schedules around that too. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing so that you don't miss out when we talk about that in a future video. I'll be seeing you in another video. Nap well, people!